So this is a piece that I drew quite some time ago, probably 2 or 3 years, I think. And I finally decided to color it. And I started out with a set of watercolors that was assembled from other sets of watercolors, because I have quite a bit. I one day just decided to take all of them apart and sort them out into color palettes that work a little bit better for me. And I like this one because it's a lot of warm, almost earthy tones, but there's still more or less the colors that you want to use most, I think. And I don't have the best relationship with my art right now. I haven't had the best relationship with my art for quite some time, actually. And I want to kind of improve that. I started a couple months ago just making sure I sketch a little bit more often. I don't really want to do it every day because sometimes things happen, but if I can, I like to just fill a couple pages in my sketchbook while I'm watching TV or something in the evening. And doing that got me more into doing art, or rather, it made me want to do more art, I think is the way to put that. And unfortunately here the clip is about to end, but there's lots to go. Right now I'm basically doing an underpainting, and quite literally at that as well. So I did that with watercolors, and normally I'm a lot more, I don't want to say careful, that's the wrong word, but I like to work wet on dry. I know wet on wet can do some things like what I'm using it to do here, but normally I like the colors to be as nice and even as possible. But in this case, since it's an underpainting, I wanted it to be a little bit more colorful and a little bit more chaotic. So what I'm doing here is just adding in some extra colors, or rather extra shades of green, so that when I paint over it later, the pencil, or when I color over it later with the pencils, they don't have to do as much work. But I'm also not being super detailed or super... Again, my brain wants to come back to careful, but that's not the word I want. I'm not really being deliberate. I think that's the word I need. I just want to put down some darker shades of green, and then I'll move on to... Can't remember what I moved on to next, but it doesn't matter because you don't get to see it anyway. But I used to do a lot of commission work. And it started off, as these things do, as a lot of fun, because I got to do art and I got paid for it, and it was a fun way to bring in a little bit of money. And then it just wound up being the only reason I was doing any kind of art. And if I sat down and did any art for myself, I felt guilty because I had all of these other commissions I should have been working on but wasn't. But now I'm on to the color pencil part, and the way I do colored pencils is always with the lightest pressure possible. And for the most part, I was actually using Amazon's colored pencils. They've got a set of something like 72. I can't remember exactly. It's somewhere in that ballpark. And I like that set almost more than I like my Prismacolors, because they're not as bright and they're not as saturated. They're more... There's a lot of warm tones in it, and there's a lot of just, again, not really earthy tones, but they work better for a lot of the moodier kind of pictures that I like to do. And I start off just putting down where highlights are going to be, and then kind of work out from there. So I find the highlights, and then I find the areas of deep shadow, and I just throw a lot of feathering and quite a lot of layers. I move from the dark into the light, and I can get a pretty good gradient doing it this way. Not to mention the paint underneath being messy as hell really helps that as well. And I know my desk is all wobbly. I'm trying to find a way to fix that. A big part of it is that my light and my camera are attached to the desk that I'm coloring on, so any amount of shaking gets imparted onto that, and then it just gets worse. But I did get a new camera. I'll probably still continue to use this one, but I'll be able to have better angles pretty soon. I just need to get a few more parts for it. But I used to have a YouTube channel, another one, a long time ago for art as well. And that one didn't last very long, unfortunately. I think I had it going for about 2 years. And then Elsagate happened. And then they started deciding that all videos to do with any kind of art or drawing were for children. And that channel just never gained its momentum back. But I decided I'd start again, new channel, and not really care much about the YouTube aspect. Just use it as a place to put videos up because I like making videos. And I like making videos of my art. And that has, I think, gone quite a long way as well into making me want to do more art. And I can't really describe it. I think it's just part of the whole process. It's an excuse to sit down, maybe have an audio book or watching some TV for 4 or 5 hours at a time, unbothered, and just kind of enjoying myself. And then afterward, I get the other task of putting together a video. And I like the editing a lot more than I do the voiceover. But, I mean, I guess we kind of have to do the voiceover these days. Back in my day, you could just put music over it and people would watch it. But I can kind of understand also why that has sort of gone out of fashion in a way. People want videos that, actually have a human being in them, and I get that. Otherwise, I'd have just slapped the song on it and called it good. Also, I know my hair keeps getting in the way. Not really much I can do about that. There's a lot of hair, and I often have to get really close in there with my entire nose, like right up on the page sometimes, to be able to see what I'm doing. But the layers, they're slowly coming together. It's just layer after layer. I really only use the weight of the pencil itself. So there's not a whole lot of buildup that gets in the way between layers, which is nice. And that lets me put down even more layers. Sometimes, I didn't have to do it on this one, but sometimes I will even use a shot of a workable fixative that you can just spray over the piece and then let it dry, and then you can come back and color over it even more because it creates a rougher texture over everything that's already down. And that lets you get in there and put even more layers on top. But this one wasn't that detailed. So I'd never really had to do that, I don't think. I don't remember doing it anyway. But you can see even with the really light, soft layers, you can still get some deep saturated colors that way. And I like doing it this way because of the texture that it gives. you don't have a whole lot of those streaks going through the drawing where your pencil has just become that much more unsharp as it's used, and it changes the way that it goes down on the paper. For the most part, by the time you're done, you really only get the paper texture on there. And because I must have originally planned on doing this watercolor or gouache or something, because I had put it on watercolor paper. So that really nice, heavily textured paper made for a nice kind of experience with the colored pencils, because that creates more tooth and more surface area. So you're able to fill in all of those little barely covered gaps without having to really grind your pencil in there. And colored pencils are one of those things where every couple of years I decide that my current working set has just become really gross and unusable. So I get myself a new set and supplement that with spares, so I can take from a spare box and then use the spares if, like, I break a pencil or if I just use it to death. Like, I never use black. I probably have about 30 black pencils right now. It's just not a good color to use. And white, I really only use for highlighting, so I don't go through that as much as I do other colors as well, because there are better shades to use than white for the same reason there are better shades to use than black. And the way that I do my shading is I will use a complementary color. So this piece has a lot of orange in it, both in the brown in the tree, the fox, the trees off in the background, and even the grass is not quite a greeny green. It's more of a yellowy orangey green. So for the most part, all of my shading in this was done with, I think it was a single Prussian blue pencil, and then just darker shades of the actual color that I was going for, and then just feathering it up into the lighter areas. Like here where I'm on the, you can see I'm using the blue here just to find the darkest of the shadows on him. And I probably should have shaded his face even more than I did. But at the same time, I didn't want his face to be completely obscured, so it's just a little bit of color on there with only a few layers. And I really love how bright this fox turned out, because like I said, the Amazon pencils, they don't tend to be as bright, and I'm missing two of the orange ones somehow. Don't know where they went, so I kept having to dip into my Prismacolor sets. But the reason I have kind of leaned away from the Prismacolor, and I even have a few other sets of no-name pencils that I like, because they've got that harder core in them. So you can do lighter, fluffier layers a lot more easily. With the Prismacolors being so soft, I find it difficult sometimes to maintain a consistent layer pressure. And then that's when you do get that really nasty, waxy buildup. I think colored pencils these days are, a lot of them are wax-based. They just feel like they are. I know there are some that are like oil-based, or I think I've even heard clay-based pencils, but that might be like graphite or something, I'm not sure. But basically, I like a harder lead, or a core, it's not a lead, whatever you want to call it. And I like this song, because it sounds like it should be on the soundtrack to the to the Ballad of Wallace Island. It's got that kind of Basden feel to it. Nice, pretty song. That's why I picked it. But yeah, you can see here I'm just using, I don't even remember what color this was, like a cream or a sand or something. I can't quite read it on the pencil. Because I don't like to use white, because so few things are actually going to ever be stark white. There's going to be lighting, there's going to be environmental issues, that's something else, factors, and something will always impart some sort of color to the white, whether it's dirty or there's just really warm lighting or whatever. Unless you're a Stuart Semple paint, you're not going to get that complete full white. And it's the same thing with the black. If you start with the darkest color in your kit, you can't really, oh, that's some bad shaking. You can't really go any darker than that, which is why I like to start with a dark blue, or in pieces that are more blue or purple, I will reach for a dark brown. Which you can see here, I am doing deeper shading over here. I can't tell if that's the blue or if I started with a green one. Usually I start with the blue. And when it was Prismacolor, I was using a lot of that indigo blue. And that's always the first one to go, is my dark blue. And my little blue pencil here, assuming that's what it is, because I can't remember, that one's going pretty quick as well. I feel like I sharpened it 3 or 4 times doing this piece. And right now I'm working on the grass, and some common advice that you'll hear is that you shouldn't draw every single blade of grass. Although I have seen some beautiful paintings where people seem to have done exactly that. But what I'm doing here, rather than trying to draw blades of grass, is I want to get that sort of look where the wind's blowing and the grass is moving with the wind in waves. So I'm just really finding where the shadows and highlights are going to be. And then just repeating that layer after layer with different colors. And after a while, it does sort of start to come together. And you can see that here with each little jump forward. Just adding as many different shades of green and stuff that I could, and not even always going in the same direction with the pencil, creates nice little bits of texture and suggests more changes in the landscape than I actually bothered to draw. And I do this a lot with my line art. I go fairly minimalist a lot of time, and then use the line art itself to just hold the colored pencil or hold the paint or whatever I'm using into place, and let those do all of the detailing. And you can see how with each layer, on every bit, with each new little color, more detail and texture will show up. Like, I didn't want the stones to have the same texture necessarily as the tree did. And because this is a really heavy-toothed watercolor paper, it was almost difficult to kind of avoid those textures. So what I did was I was smoothing it out as much as I could and changing the direction that I was dragging the pencil quite a bit as well. And I don't know how much that worked for getting a different texture. I think for the most part it just kind of screwed up being able to layer more pencil down, because it might have spread out some of the wax that's in the cores more than I would have liked it to. And I kept coming back to the tree as well. I would look at it, and it wasn't quite where I wanted it to be. And you can also see a bunch that the camera keeps changing position and jumping around, and that's because I think this took me oh, I want to see, say, 4 or 5 days to finish, because there's only so many hours in a day that I can sit hunched over my desk. I do have a drafting table, and it's a nice drafting table, but right now it's holding a turntable and my air conditioner, because I don't have a good seat for the drafting table. It's too hot. It's too tall for me. The chair that I use at my desk is an armchair, and I can't find an armchair big enough that will let me use it back here on my drafting table. The trees here were something that I had specifically done this way to challenge myself. Same with the clouds. Things like distant trees and the kind of shading on clouds is something I've always sort of struggled with, because it winds up very easily looking like just, I don't even know, homogeneous clumps of nothing. So I was really trying to break this section up as much as I could, just finding anywhere I could stick a shadow or stick a highlight. And I also tried to sort of imply, I guess, the trunks and the branches down there. My husband looked at this when he looked at it, and he said he thought that they were bushes, which I can see where he got that, because I didn't quite do what I wanted to do with this bit. And I know that looks like I'm going from white to just straight up orange. These pencils are really shiny. They're really reflective, and sometimes my little overhead light would just shine on it really awkwardly, and it made it very difficult for me to see. I'm not sure. I've got some polarized filters for this new camera that I got. It's Canon. And I've got like 2 or 3 other Canons that all use the same lenses. That's specifically why I went for this one, actually. It's quite old, but it's not so old as my other ones, because it actually does video, which is nice, and I've tested it. It looks really good, and I'll probably have to play around with which lens works the best when I get there, but we'll do that later. That's a bridge to burn when we get to it. I can't believe either that it took me this long to finally get a camera that does video, because like I'd go online and I'd look at them and it's like, I need a new camera, but I don't need to spend $600 on a new camera. And I don't know why it did not occur to me until about 2 weeks ago that eBay exists and people will sell you a perfectly good camera for $60, because honestly, like, so many digital cameras are basically the same. The real difference is the lenses, and I've got some pretty decent ones. Not amazing, but better than what a webcam uses. And at this point, I decided that I was sick of not being able to move the whole paper around as well as I would have wanted to. So I took off the tape and decided this was when I'm finally going to start twisting the page around. I try not to do that as much when I'm filming, because it makes the videos really difficult to put into any kind of a better arrangement, really. I don't know what this edit is. Apparently I left a big cut in here so you can, I don't know, enjoy it at this point. There's definitely more to do. There's still about 5 more minutes in the video. Oh, here we go. Must have been a new day. Yes, it was, because I decided to ink it. And the ink that I use is a mixture of India ink and this stuff. It's Stuart Semple's Black, and this is the 1.0, because it's the only one that's still released in a powder. And so I put about 10 grams of that into about 2 ounces of ink, and then a little bit of gum arabic. And all that does is it helps suspend the powder into the India ink and just take away the shine, because I don't like shiny artwork that much. I like it all to be more matte colored. And this is me trying to work out how to do this, because I'm not very confident with my inking at all. And so you see me switching between a pencil or a paintbrush, and then I've got 2 of these glass-tipped nibs, or pens. And I've got a few fountain pens as well, but I decided I'd try to stick with these. What I should have done, and what I didn't do, was put down a layer of fixative on it so that I wouldn't be trying to draw on the wax. I think that's the problem that I made, or the mistake that I made. Something like that. I do really want to get better at inking. I'm not amazing at it. It's partially a confidence issue and partially just a sometimes my hands don't do what I tell them to do issue. And I've got these little pens and they're lovely, and I do think the problem was just the wax on the page. Especially once I started to get the hang of it. And one of these pens, I can't tell which one it is. One of them is very, very slightly chipped on the tip. And for a while I thought that it would be completely unusable. And at this point now, I can't tell which one it is. And that could be because I managed to smooth it out and don't remember it, or if it's just wasn't as bad as I remembered it. But, I mean, things are working now. They're working fine. Once I worked out how to put the ink down on the wax. And I probably could have added quite a lot more detail lines in here, but like I said, I like the really minimalist lines. Although that might change if I manage to get comfortable with line art again. What I used to do back when I had a printer that worked for it was I would do my line art digitally and then print it out. But not all mediums work with that, and I've got both a laser and an inkjet printer, and trying to remember which ones will mess with which is impossible. But here we go. It's all finished. Or about as finished as it's going to be. At this point, I gave it a blast of the fixative. So here he is, cozy little fox. If you want to see more, subscribe, throw a like on there, comment, all of that call to action-y stuff. And I'll be back soon with another one.